I swear I was just trying to prove a point. That all the so-called spiritual awakening, hype sweeping through New York's elite circles was nothing but a trendy facade. My buddy Ryan used to party with me every night, but suddenly he's out here in linen robes and prayer beads, chanting mantras like he was born in a monastery. Even the socialites girls I've seen pop champagne on yachts started wearing silk kipayos and sipping herbal tea in Zen centers like they were born reborn Buddhists. So when Ryan begged me to come listen to a sermon at some spiritual retreat outside Napa Valley, I showed up in a white tank top, floral boxers, flip-flops, and a hairstyle that screamed rebellion. I told him, "Want to bet all these people are fake? I'll kiss the first one I see and prove they're not as devout as they pretend to be." That's how I ended up kissing Evelyn Blakey's, the Evelyn Blake heiress to the Blake Empire and the most untouchable woman in the New York elite. She was sitting there all serene, glowing like a damn moon goddess, and I just leaned in and did it, thinking I was being funny. She looked shocked, shoved me away, and bolted. I laughed like an idiot. Ryan didn't. He grabbed my wrist like he'd seen a ghost. "Logan, do you know who you just kissed?" I brushed it off, some rich chick playing Zen Barbie. He looked ready to faint. "You just kissed Evelyn Blake." My mirror dropped from my hand and shattered on the ground. My blood froze. Evelyn Blake, the only daughter of the Blakes, legacy billionaires with their fingers in everything from finance to media to pharmaceuticals. People worship her like some sort of living deity. Since childhood, she's been a disciple at the Zen spiritual retreat, took vows, and only recently started managing her family's corporate empire. Guys have tried everything to woo her. They fail. One guy even followed her to the retreat his dad's company filed for bankruptcy 2 days later. Everyone learned the hard way. You don't mess with Evelyn Blake. And I just broke her spiritual path by stealing her first kiss. I panicked. I mean real, chest-thumping, cold sweat panic. I packed a bag in 5 minutes and booked the first flight to Los Angeles to hide. Before I left, I messaged Ryan, "Bro, I'm laying low in LA. If Evelyn's people start sniffing around, warn me." He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No news came. For 5 whole days, nothing. No scandal. No death threats. Not even a whisper online about Buddhist heiress kissed at retreat. Maybe she didn't care? Maybe she was too enlightened to be mad? I let myself believe that. Dumb idea. On the 6th day, I got an invite to a business gala. Perfect chance to unwind after days of paranoid hiding. I cleaned up nice sharp suit, custom shoes, slicked hair. I was back, baby. At the event, I was my usual charming self, chatting up strangers, clinking glasses. Then I noticed her. A stunning woman in a crimson dress, heels that could kill, sipping wine alone. Her eyes locked onto mine like she knew me. I thought, jackpot. I walked over, flashed my signature grin, and offered her a drink. She clinked my glass and downed her wine in one shot. I matched her. She leaned in and whispered, "Mr. Carter, you're just as bold as they say." I blinked. "Do I know you?" She smiled slyly. "Not yet, but would you like to get some air?" I nodded like the fool I am. She led me out to the hotel garden. The heat hit me like a wall, but I didn't care. She was hot, mysterious, and clearly interested. As we walked, she suddenly ducked away. I followed the sound into a pavilion and saw her. But not the same her. No more flirty smile. Now she stood tall, elegant, eyes unreadable. "What's your name again?" I asked, half joking. She stepped into the light. My heart stopped. "Evelyn." "Freaking. Blake." I tried to play it cool, turning to leave. "Sorry. Thought you were someone else." "You seemed pretty sure the last time," she said softly, stepping closer. My fight or flight reflex kicked in, but my legs wouldn't move. I smiled weakly. "Wow, Evelyn Blake, what a surprise." "Come with me," she said calmly. I booked the top floor suite. That line should have been sexy. Instead, it felt like a death sentence. I followed her upstairs, trying to calculate my survival chances. She opened the suite door, stepped inside, and I followed like a sheep. As soon as the door shut, I turned to joke only to freeze. The room was full of men in black suits. Bodyguards. One of them? That fake seductress from the party. Miss Blake's assistant. She introduced herself smoothly. "You can call me Madison." Evelyn sat on the couch like she owned the world. Sit, Mr. Carter. I sat. Drink, she offered. I nodded numbly. Madison handed me a glass of red wine. I downed it in one gulp. Evelyn poured another. You're bold, she said again. I forced a laugh. It's my charm. A third glass followed. Then, she said, now that you're warmed up, let's talk. I tensed. She crossed her legs, fingers drumming against her knee. I hear your family company just landed a big deal. Carter Group's rising fast. My stomach dropped. Oh, that was my dad, not me. I just exist. She smirked. So, it wasn't you who assaulted me with a kiss at a sacred temple. I nearly choked. That was a mistake. A huge, stupid mistake. Please don't drag my family into this. I'll take responsibility. I'll be your assistant for 3 months. I'll do whatever you want. She tilted her head. You'll work for me? Like be my new assistant? I nodded desperately. She turned to Madison. Didn't you say you want a vacation time? Madison grinned. Yes, ma'am. Starting now. Evelyn looked at me. Congrats, Mr. Carter. You start tomorrow. 3-month trial period. Don't be late. And just like that, Logan freaking Carter, former party prince, was now personal assistant to Evelyn Blake, then heiress, corporate queen, and woman I accidentally kissed at a monastery. Kill me now. I woke up the next morning to the worst sound imaginable. My phone ringing nonstop like a damn alarm set by Satan himself. I fumbled around, eyes still crusted shut, and blindly answered with a groggy, Who the hell is this? On the other end, a woman's voice as smooth and icy as an expensive cocktail cut through my fog. Mr. Carter, you have 15 minutes. The car will be at your gate. Don't be late. Then she hung up. I sat bolt upright in bed, eyes now wide open. 15 minutes? 15 minutes. I couldn't even take a decent morning dump in 15 minutes, let alone get dressed, look human, and prepare myself to face Evelyn Blake. I threw myself out of bed like I was escaping a fire, brushing teeth, washing my face, pulling on clothes in record time, running around like a headless chicken on Red Bull. Somehow be divine intervention or sheer panic, I made it downstairs right as the 15-minute timer ran out. But of course, the car wasn't there. Not a soul in sight. Not even a squirrel. I called the number back, now fully awake and fully pissed. Hey, you said 15 minutes. I made it. Where the hell are you? Evelyn's voice came through like she was sipping tea with a smirk. You're late. You're not even here. I snapped. You said be ready in 15. Are you questioning me, Mr. Carter? She interrupted, tone dangerous. Hasn't Madison explained that following instructions is the #1 rule for assistants? No, she forgot that detail, I grumbled. Evelyn sighed dramatically. Well, consider yourself educated. Now take notes. I'll be there in another 15. Another 15? What was the first 15 for pure psychological warfare? I hung up and went back inside, muttering curses under my breath and throwing on some deodorant like I was prepping for battle. 15 minutes later, to the second, a sleek black town car pulled up to the front. The new driver greeted me politely and offered to take my non-existent luggage. No bags, I told him. Just my poor, suffering soul. Inside the car, Evelyn was already seated, legs crossed, sunglasses on, looking like a Vogue cover come alive. She glanced at me without turning her head. Let's get breakfast. Morning to you too, I said dryly, buckling in. She didn't respond. Classy. She sat like a queen, one hand draped over the armrest, the other lazily tapping her fingers against the window, radiating detached power. Where's your prayer beads? I asked, trying to sound casual. Evelyn raised a brow. Excuse me, you know the beads? Buddha bling? You're the Zen heiress. Don't you carry those things around? She exhaled sharply, a smirk forming. Only when I'm meditating. Unlike your little cosplay at the temple. I snorted. You gotta admit, I wore that tank top with conviction. You wore that tank top like a dare, she replied, unamused. Soon we pulled up to a luxury hotel where apparently the breakfast menu came with 7-figure views. Evelyn got out first, and I being the newly minted assistant trust to hold the door for her like a gentleman/hostage. Madison would have been proud. Inside, I followed her lead, pulling out chairs, arranging the napkin just right, even patting her shoulder like I'd seen in movies. Evelyn gave me a strange look, then gestured for me to sit. "Over there," she said, pointing to the seat directly across from her. I hesitated. "Boss, shouldn't I, sit at the other table? Or like behind a pillar? I'm just the assistant." "You rode in the same car as me," she said coolly. "Next time, should I make you run behind it?" I shut up and sat. Breakfast was suspiciously peaceful too peaceful. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting another dozen bodyguards to pop out with contract for me to sign in blood. Evelyn sipped her coffee, then said, "You'll accompany me to a meeting today in San Francisco. It's important. You'll take notes." I blinked. "Like handwritten notes? Is there another kind?" she asked, eyebrow arching. "I mean recording? Voice memos? AI transcription apps?" "You're the assistant," she said simply. "You assist. With your hands. Use a pen." I wanted to cry. After breakfast, she handed me the car keys. "You're driving." I laughed out loud. Funny, she didn't blink. "You're driving." "Evelyn," I said slowly, "I don't have a license." Her face cracked, like her brain short-circuited. "You're what?" "I'm unlicensed," I said, with the dead seriousness of a man who knows he's already dead. She stared at me like I just confessed to arson. Unbelievable. She yanked the keys from my hand and got behind the wheel herself. I climbed in beside her, feeling like a failed Uber applicant. "Should I sit in the back so it feels more professional?" "Are you serious?" she growled. "Do I look like your damn chauffeur?" "Little bit," I muttered, then immediately regretted it. The drive was awkward. Evelyn drove like a machine smooth, focused, terrifying. When we reached the office building, she parked and got out with the confidence of someone about to buy the whole block. I trailed behind her like a lost dog. "So I'll just wait outside while you do your business thing?" "You're coming in," she said without slowing down. "You taking notes? Try not to drool." The conference room was full of suits who looked like they hadn't blinked since 2009. Everyone turned when we entered, eyes flicking from her to me. Evelyn didn't bother with introductions. "Let's begin." I sat beside her, pulled out a notepad Madison had given me, and prepared to die. The first guy started talking. I wrote, "Dear Diary, this is hell." Then I tried to focus, scribbling lines like synergize market value, ROI, something something. At some point, the words started blurring into nonsense. My eyelids got heavier and heavier, and then I was out. I woke up with a sore neck and Evelyn's arm under my head. She was scrolling through her phone like nothing was weird. I sat up, horrified, and checked my notes. It looked like a toddler had doodled a tornado. "Great job," she said sarcastically. "Can't wait to read your report." I had a sugar crash, I mumbled. "Didn't eat enough carbs." "Sure," she said. "You'll type up your notes and email them by morning." Of course, I lied. The meeting ended, and I dragged my carcass home, called Ryan, and dumped the story on him like a ranting lunatic. He laughed so hard I wanted to reach through the phone and slap him. "You fell asleep on the job," he wheezed. "Bro, do you even assistant? Don't laugh. Help me. What do meeting notes even look like? You don't have a voice recorder?" "No." "Then you should have used your phone." "Ugh, you idiot." In desperation, I called Madison. She answered, sounding suspiciously cheerful on her vacation. "I never took meeting notes," she said. "That's for the admin team." "You got played, Carter." I hung up, reevaluating every life decision that brought me to this moment. "Screw it," I muttered. "I'm a special assistant. I don't do minutes." I threw on a bathrobe, poured a drink, and decided to survive the next day with sheer charisma. But deep down, I knew Evelyn Blake had me exactly where she wanted, and I wasn't even mad about it. If I had $1 for every time Evelyn Blake disrupted my sleep with a phone call, I could buy myself a new identity and move to Bermuda. The third morning into my new indentured servitude gig as her assistant, she called at 6:32 a.m. "Sharp. Logan, you have 15 minutes. Get dressed, pack light, we're flying back to New York today." I barely processed the words before she hung up again, and there I was, half naked, brushing my teeth with one hand while stuffing a pair of boxers and a phone charger into a duffel bag with the other. I didn't even own that much stuff in LA. To begin with, me entire escape plan had been minimalist, remember? 15 minutes later, like clockwork, the same sleek town car pulled up to my rented villa, The new driver helping me in the back seat, where Evelyn was already reclined like a queen in exile, her eyes closed, face bare, but somehow still looking like she belonged on a magazine cover. I didn't dare speak. She didn't open her eyes. The ride to the airport was peaceful if you ignored the internal screaming in my brain, which only got louder when I realized we weren't heading toward the commercial terminals. Oh no, she was taking me on a private jet. I don't know what I expected, maybe something subtle, sleek, elite? Nah, the damn thing looked like a billionaire's Flex Mobile, complete with gold trim and monogram steps. "You coming?" she said, finally glancing at me as I froze at the bottom of the stairs. "Why, yeah, just admiring the craftsmanship." I mumbled and followed her on board like a confused trophy husband. On the plane, she took the larger seat, obviously, and left me the smaller one across from her. I try not to look like I was drooling over the spread of gourmet breakfast that appeared like magic the second we took off. We didn't talk much. She played with her phone, occasionally glanced out the window, and once, just once, looked over at me and said, "You drool when you sleep." I choked on my orange juice. "That's slander," I coughed. "It's also true," she said, then went back to scrolling. The moment we landed, her driver picked us up, and instead of heading to the Blake estate or any of her shiny offices, she told him, "Take us to the retreat." My heart nearly dropped out of my ass. "The what now?" "The Zen retreat," she said casually, looking out the window. "You seemed stressed. Thought you could use some clarity." Yeah. Or maybe she just wanted to return me to the scene of the crime where I first kissed her like an idiot in front of a bunch of chanting rich kids. But whatever. I braced myself for judgment and shame, but when we arrived, she just led me to the vegetarian dining hall and handed me a tray like we were in high school lunch period. "Try the eggplant," she said. "It's better than it looks." To be honest, it was. She even served me rice herself, and for a weird moment, it felt like we were just two Pia Plino contracts, no family legacies, no blackmail assistant gig, just people. That moment passed quickly, because the second we got back in the car, she dropped her next bombshell. "There's a gala tonight. You're coming. Get a haircut. Get a suit. Use my stylist. With your card?" I asked, eyebrows raised. "Obviously," she replied, looking bored. "You're representing me. You mean I'm your arm candy?" "That too." I couldn't tell if she was joking, but I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity to max out a black card that wasn't mine. 2 hours later, I'd had a facial, a scalp massage, a new haircut, and was wearing a tailored suit that fit me like sin. When I met her downstairs, Evelyn actually paused. Just for a second. Then she looked away like nothing happened. But I saw a micro blip in her expression. "Ready," she said coolly. "Lead the way," I said, offer my arm. She hesitated, then looped her hand through mine like it was a business transaction. But her grip was firm, controlled. She was nervous, and that made two of us. The gala was everything you'd expect from the New York elite, glittering chandeliers, champagne towers, whispered gossip behind manicured fingers. And there I was, walking in with Evelyn Blake, the one woman in the entire room that no one dared touch. The moment we stepped in, heads turned. I swear I heard someone whisper, "Is that her new boyfriend?" I wasn't, of course. Just the assistant. The plus one. The PR distraction. But I played the role, stood tall beside her, nodded at people like I mattered. When someone asked who I was, Evelyn said smoothly, "This is Logan Carter, son of Carter Group. Not my assistant. Not the guy I blackmailed. No." She introduced me like I belonged. That small gesture, that one line, elevated me instantly. People began shaking my hand, offer me business cards. I was floating on a cloud of clout I didn't earn, and I liked it. Maybe a little too much. Evelyn, meanwhile, was holding court like a queen. Elegant, unreadable, but clearly watching every move I made. When she started getting swarmed by old men offering drinks, I leaned in and whispered, "Need backup?" She nodded slightly. I stepped in front of the next guy who tried to offer her a glass and smiled. "She's had enough, thanks." It became a pattern. For every drink offered, I took the bullet, glass after glass. Wine, whiskey, champagne, until my head was spinning and my steps got less coordinated. Evelyn noticed. "Are you drunk?" she asked as we reached the elevator to leave. "No," I said with a lazy grin. "Just buzzed with purpose." "You're slurring." I'm charming, I corrected. And loyal. See how I protected you tonight? Like a knight. A very, very tipsy night. God help me, she muttered. We reached the suite she booked off. Of course, it was on the top floor. Of course, it was massive. And of course, I immediately flopped onto the couch like I'd been shot. She went into the bathroom, probably to remove her war paint. I stayed sprawled like roadkill, texting Ryan, bro. She introduced me as Carter Group. No assistant title. I think she likes me. Ryan replied with 17 screaming emojis and a single go for it. I was still grinning like a fool when Evelyn came out, dressed down in silk loungewear that somehow made her look even more dangerous. You should rest, she said. You're clearly out of it. I could rest better, I slurred, if you stayed here. You know, to supervise. She rolled her eyes, but didn't leave. Instead, she walked over, pulled a blanket over me, and sat on the edge of the couch. You're an idiot, she said softly. But you're my idiot now. I blinked up at her. That mean I'm officially hired? 3-month probation, she said. And no benefits. You sure? I asked, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Because this couch feels very full of potential. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared down at me like she was trying to read something hidden beneath all the jokes and wine. And then, just like that, she leaned down so close I could count every eyelash and whispered, Don't tempt me, Carter. Spoiler alert, I did. And that night something changed. So here's the thing, I was pretending to be drunk, right? Just a little light tipsy to earn sympathy points and maybe, just maybe, steal a kiss if the moonlight and the blanket played in my favor. What I didn't expect was that Evelyn Blake, the untouchable Zen heiress with a heart made of diamonds and a schedule stricter than federal law, would sit next to me on that sweet couch like we were in some rom-com slow burn, eyes locked, tension thick enough to slice with a sushi knife. She didn't move when I touched her hair. She didn't blink when I teased her about staying. She just stared, calculating like she was weighing sin against scandal. And then she leaned down, close enough that her breath ghosted over my lips, and whispered, Don't tempt me, Carter. So I did what any idiot in love with danger would do, tempted her. My hand slid from her cheek to the nape of her neck, warm skin meeting nervous fingertips, and I kissed her. Not a rushed, clumsy collision, but slow, deliberate, like I was memorizing the shape of her mouth and testing if the forbidden fruit really was sweeter. Spoiler, it was. At first, she froze, maybe from shock, maybe from disbelief, but then she exhaled, and something in her gave way. Her fingers tangled in my collar, her lips parted, and suddenly it wasn't just a kiss, it was war. Messy, breathless, addictive war. We barely made it to the bed. There was a lot of stumbling, some buttons popped somewhere between the couch and the sheets, and at one point I think I knocked over a lamp, but neither of us cared. The moment her back hit the mattress, her eyes darkened, like she was trying to prove something not to me, but to herself. That she could let go, that she could want, that even Zen queens needed chaos sometimes. She kissed me like she was punishing me for existing and rewarding me at the same time. My hands roamed, her breath hitched, her thighs tightened around me, and every logical thought I'd ever had evaporated into the soft groans echoing off the hotel suite walls. At some point, I paused just to look at her really look. Hair messy, lips bruised, cheeks flushed. She wasn't Evelyn Blake the heiress anymore. She was just Evelyn, and she was looking at me like I was both her biggest mistake and the only thing keeping her grounded. You okay? I asked, voice hoarse. Do I look like I'm not? She whispered, wrapping her arms around my neck. Shut up and kiss me again. I obeyed. That night, I broke every unspoken rule between assistant and employer, between sinner and saint, between chaos and control. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The next morning, I woke up disoriented, sore in ways that suggested someone had definitely used me as a spiritual exercise, and blinking against the sunlight pouring into the massive hotel windows. Evelyn was already up, fully dressed, seated at the edge of the bed with her back to me. Her spine was too straight, her silence too loud. I panicked, not because I regretted anything, but because I had no clue which version of her I'd get today, Ice Queen or regret bomb. Morning, I offered cautiously, sitting up and wrapping the blanket around my waist because I'm not a savage. She didn't look at me. Did you sleep well? Best sleep of my life. I replied honestly, then added, did I snore? You talk in your sleep? She said. Something about thank God for black cards and Zen girls got game. I groaned and covered my face. I was dreaming. Don't hold that against me. She finally turned, eyes unreadable, lips neutral. Do you think this changes anything? I swallowed. You mean like the job? Or the company? Or us? There is no us, she said quickly. Too quickly. Last night was a lapse in judgment. We were both drunk. You didn't drink, I pointed out. You wash your face before bed, remember? And you still kissed me like you meant it. Her eyes narrowed. Logan. No, look, I get it, I said, holding up my hands. You're Evelyn Blake. I'm the idiot you blackmailed into being your assistant. We're not supposed to hook up, but we did. And if you want to pretend it didn't happen, fine. I'll shut up. I'll be professional. But don't act like you didn't feel something too. She stared at me for a long moment before standing up and walking to the door. Get dressed. We have a flight to catch. Translation, conversation over. I sighed and pulled my pants on, heart heavier than it had any right to be. We barely spoke on the flight back to New York. She sat by the window with her noise-canceling headphones on, fiddling with prayer beads that hadn't made an appearance in months. I chewed on a protein bar and stared at my own reflection, wondering how the hell I'd gone from reckless party boy to regret-ridden pseudo-boyfriend in under a week. Back in Manhattan, she didn't take me to her estate or drop me at my place. She had the driver take us to her company's main headquarters, a towering glass monolith with her name etched in gold across the lobby. You'll start working on-site from now on, she said as we walked inside. I've assigned you an office. Madison left notes. Try not to screw it up. You're really going full boss mode, huh? I muttered. She paused before the elevator. You said you'd be professional. Prove it. Right, I said, stepping in after her. No feelings. No flirting. Just pure, sterile work environment where we pretend I didn't see you mow my name like a prayer. She flinched. Just a little. Then she smirked. Careful, Carter. You're not irreplaceable. Neither are you, I said under my breath. She laughed as the elevator dinged open. Keep telling yourself that. That week was hell. She gave me a schedule packed tighter than a Harvard freshman's planner. I coordinated meetings, filtered emails, handled logistics for an upcoming investor summit, and still somehow got roped into taste testing 3 different types of sparkling water because she needed feedback from someone with no palate. Every time I tried to talk to her like a human being, she shut me down. Every time I touched her accidentally, she stiffened like I'd dropped a live wire on her. But the worst part? She kept looking at me when she thought I wasn't watching, soft, conflicted glances that screamed everything she refused to say out loud. And I was hooked. I wanted more. Not just the physical stuff, though, yeah, that too, but the real her. The one who laughed when I teased her, who leaned into my hand when I brushed her hair away, who let herself be seen. But she was building walls faster than I could climb. Friday night came, and she told me to cancel all her appointments for the weekend. Personal retreat, she said. No calls. No messages. You go to a monastery? I asked, half joking. You gonna shave your head and find inner peace? I'm going somewhere you can't follow, she said. Then she hesitated. Unless you're willing to cross a line you can't come back from. What kind of line? I asked slowly. She leaned in, her lips just inches from mine. The kind where I stop pretending you don't matter. My breath caught. But before I could answer, she stepped back, turned on her heel, and left me standing there in the middle of a boardroom with my heart beating like a damn drumline. I stood in that boardroom way longer than I should have, just staring at the door Evelyn had vanished behind like it owed me an explanation, my heart thudding so loud I could hear it in my damn eardrums. And all I could think about was that look in her eyes, that half-dare, half-confession look right before she said, unless you're willing to cross a line you can't come back from, like she wasn't already tangled in this mess as deeply as I was, like she hadn't been the one pulling the string, tighter every damn day. And I knew then I was already across that line. I'd been across it since the moment I kissed her at the temple, maybe even before that, maybe the second I looked into those 2 calm eyes and decided to mess with the universe just to see her break expression for once. And now I wasn't sure if I wanted her heart or just her chaos, or maybe both. But one thing was certain: I couldn't go back, and neither could she. So I left the boardroom in a fog and spent the rest of the weekend not sleeping, not eating, just pacing around my apartment like a rabid lab rat trying to crack a code no one gave me instructions for, until finally I couldn't take it anymore and called Ryan, because if anyone could talk me off this emotional cliff, it was the guy who once told me tequila was a solution to spiritual confusion. But of course, Ryan was no help. He just screamed into the phone, "Biro, did you bang her again or what?" And I yelled back, "No, she kissed me with her eyes this time. Does that count?" And he said, "Dude, what the hell does that even mean?" And I hung up because, yeah, maybe I'd lost it. Maybe Evelyn Blake had officially broken my brain, and Monday hit like a slap to the soul when I walked into HQ and saw her back at her desk, cool as ever, dressed in a crisp ivory blouse and black pencil skirt like she hadn't just emotionally undressed me 72 hours ago and walked out like a mic drop. And when she looked up and met my eyes, no thingno flicker, no smirk, no residual tension, just "Logan, you're late." And I almost laughed because it was 8:58 and technically I was 2 minutes early, but whatever. I bit my tongue and said, "Coffee." And she replied, "Already had two," which was code for "don't try small talk today." So I backed off and tried to act like a functioning adult while my brain replayed every micro expression she threw my way like it was an FBI case file. And then, just when I thought I might get through the day without losing my mind, she walked past my desk mid-afternoon and casually said, "Clear your schedule tonight. We're attending a private investor dinner," or something that says I'm expensive but too busy to care. And I nodded like that made any sense at all. And a few hours later, I was back in another fitted suit, riding in the back of her car, sitting close enough to smell that hint of jasmine perfume she always wore like armor, but not close enough to touch. Not that I dared. Not when she was sitting so stiffly, scrolling her phone like she was trying to pretend I didn't exist, even though her leg kept bumping mine every time the car hit a bump. And we got to the dinner, a fancy rooftop affair with glass walls and a skyline view, so clean it looked photoshopped, and I was doing my best to smile, nod, and sip my overpriced wine without internally combusting. But then one of the investors, a silver-haired jerk with a wandering eye and a predatory grin, leaned a little too close to Evelyn and said something that made her jaw tighten and eyes narrow just a hair. I didn't even think before stepping between them and casually sliding an arm around her waist like I'd done it 1,000 times. And I looked the guy dead in the eye and said, "Excuse us, Evelyn's needed elsewhere." And she didn't protest, didn't even blink, just let me guide her away across the rooftop and into the shadow of a tall potted plant like it was our escape route. And when we stopped, I dropped the act and whispered, "You okay?" And she just stared at me for a second before saying, "We didn't have to do that." And I said, "I know, but I wanted to." And then something shifted in her expression, like a crack in marble, and she exhaled like the weight of the city had been resting on her ribcage. And without thinking, I reached out, brushed her hair behind her ear, and said, "You don't have to carry it all alone." And for a second, I thought she was going to break right there under the Manhattan stars. But instead, she whispered, "You shouldn't be this close." And I leaned in anyway, closing the space between us until our foreheads touched. And I said, "I crossed the line already, remember?" And her breath caught, her hands clenched into the fabric of my blazer. And just when I thought she might kiss me again, her phone rang and the moment shattered. She stepped back like nothing had happened, answered the call, and when she hung up, she said, "We're leaving," like we hadn't just shared a near-religious experience by a ficus plant. So we left, silent again, except this time it wasn't cold, it was electric, buzzing with things unsaid. And when we got back to her place, she looked at me like she wanted to speak but couldn't, and instead she said, "You can stay in the guest room tonight, it's late." And I knew that was her way of keeping me close without caving completely. So I nodded and followed her inside. But sleep didn't come easy, not when she was in the next room, not when every fiber of my being screamed to cross the hallway and knock on her door and say all the things she was too afraid to say. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready to lose her trust, not yet. And the next morning, I woke up to her voice in the hallway, giving orders like usual, except her tone was softer, less steel, and more velvet. And when she saw me standing there in a hoodie and sweats with sleep in my eyes, she smiled just a little and said, "You look terrible." And I grinned, "Yeah, I missed you too." And 4. Once, she didn't deny it. The morning she smiled at me like I wasn't the chaos in her carefully structured life was the morning I realized I was completely, irrevocably screwed because that little curve of her lips did more damage to me than all the late nights, skipped meals, and emotional whiplash combined. And even though she went right back to rattling off her schedule and throwing names, times, and meeting rooms at me like I was still just the assistant, something had shifted, not in the logistics, but in the energy. She stood a little closer when she handed me her phone. Her fingers brushed mine a little longer than necessary. And when I brought her coffee, she didn't scold me for the wrong milk. She just said, "Thanks," and held my gaze a second too long. And I knew she remembered that rooftop moment, the weight of my hand on her waist, my breath against her forehead, the way I said I'd already crossed the line, and it scared her. The idea of someone seeing her, not just the headline version, but the raw, unguarded woman behind the perfectly tailored suits and billion-dollar contracts. But I wasn't here to take her power. I was here to hold it, to understand it, to earn the right to be the one she leaned on when the boardroom lights went off and no one was looking. And it all came to a head that Thursday when we walked into yet another investor gala. Me in another custom suit, her in a black satin dress with a slit that could cause heart attacks, and everything was business as usual handshakes. Photo ops, polite lies wrapped in compliments until some finance shark decided he wanted to make a name for himself by publicly flirting with Evelyn like she was just another trophy to win. And he said something slick, something disrespectful that made her whole body go still. And before I could even think, I stepped forward and said, "You'll want to watch your tone." And the guy laughed like he couldn't believe I had the audacity, asked, "And who the hell are you?" And without missing a beat, Evelyn stepped beside me, looped her arm through mine, and said, "He's the only man in this room who could ruin you with one phone call." And that's when I knew something had changed, not just privately but publicly, because in that moment, in front of half the city's elite, she claimed Minute as her assistant. Not as some background figure, but as someone who mattered, and the whispers started, the kind that travel fast, the kind that rewrite reputations. And we left early, her hand still, gripping my arm like she was afraid to let go. And the second we got into the car, neither of us spoke, tension thick as smoke, until finally she turned to me, eyes sharp and voice shaking as she said, "Why didn't you just let me handle it?" And I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Because I'm not going to stand by while people disrespect the woman I..." But I couldn't even finish the sentence before she surged forward and kissed me, so hard I forgot my name, my job, my past, everything except. The way her mouth tasted like desperation and relief, like all the things she'd been suppressing had finally cracked loose. And when we broke apart, gasping, she whispered, "You don't get to walk away from this." And I said, "Good," because I wasn't planning to, and she pulled me in again and kissed me like she was claiming me for real this time. No retreat, no excuses, and by the time we got back to her penthouse, we didn't even make it to the bedroom. She shoved me against the wall, tore off her heels, and we lost ourselves in each other like the world outside didn't exist. And the next morning, when I woke up tangled in silk sheets and her limbs, sunlight pouring across her bare shoulders, I knew there was no going back, not for her, not for me, because this thing between us wasn't temporary or transactional anymore. It was real, messy, and utterly unprofessional, and I didn't care, not when she rolled over, still half asleep, and mumbled, "Did you schedule the 9 a.m.? And I smiled into her hair and whispered, "Already rescheduled it for 10. And she sighed in that soft, sleepy way that told me she was safe, and that maybe, just maybe, she trusted me now. And over the next few weeks, everything started changing slowly at first. Then all at once she introduced me at meetings not as her assistant, but as her partner. The Blake Group's PR subtly shifted the narrative. And when her father's old contacts raised their eyebrows, she stared them down with that unshakable poise of hers and dared them to question her choices. And at night, she curled into me like I was the anchor keeping her from drifting too far into the cold world she'd spent her whole life ruling over. And one evening, as we lay on the couch after a long day, half watching the city lights flicker through the windows, she said, "You ruined everything." And I blinked, startled, until she added, "I used to have perfect control over my life." And I reached over, tucked her hair behind her ear, and said, Yeah, but now you have someone to share the chaos with. And she didn't say anything, just leaned over and kissed my jaw and whispered, "Don't leave." And I promised her I wouldn't, not even if the sky fell. And months later, when she took me back to the retreat, the very place this whole mess started, dressed in white linen and no makeup, just her, the trees, and me, she looked up at the ancient bell and said, "You broke my karmic cycle that day, you know." And I smiled and said, "I'd do it again." And she turned to me, eyes shining, and said, "Then come break it again every lifetime." And I didn't need to ask what that meant. I just pulled her into my arms, kissed her under the sunlit wind chimes, and knew that this wasn't the end. It was the start of something wild, sacred, and so deeply ours that not even fate would dare rewrite it.